Okay, let's see. There.
It's going.
Good. That's a good sign. So today I have a lot of things that I want to share with you. And what I'm going to do is probably talk for, well, I think we're scheduled to end about noon. So I'm going to talk for about half of the time until maybe, I guess, 15 till 11 or so. And then take a little break for some administrative things. So that's my goal here. So, hmm. So, uh, what I'm going to look at is really how forgiveness and humility and hope come together. And I'm going to talk about each one of those separately, and then at the end, kind of put them together. So that's what I hope. So I hope that by the end of this talk that you'll feel like that you've built more virtue into your life, that you're able to forgive a little better, and perhaps be more humble if you wish to do that, and be more hopeful in your life. So that's that. Those are my objectives. So I am a positive psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist, but also study positive psychology. And so I thought that we ought to start by me giving you an idea of what I think positive psychology is. I look at it, no, the scientists in the study positive psychology look at it as really one of two things. One of those is it is the psychological science of happiness or subjective well-being. So this is like, what's the science behind how we get happy? And the other half of the people who study positive psych look at it as the psychological study of character strength and virtue. Well, I'm on the character strength and virtue side of this way of looking at positive psychology. So I think that what we do with positive psychology is try to figure out how people can uh, form character in themselves that they want to form and that is a positive character. So so I define positive psychology as the psychological science of eudaimonia, which is a Greek word that's been kind of appropriated by positive psychology that basically means virtue for self and others. So this is about how we are able to be more virtuous, more positive, in a way that helps both ourselves and other people. So the way that we would like to acquire virtue is demonstrated by the movie The Matrix. I don't know if y'all have seen the movie The Matrix, but Neo, who is Keanu Reeves, basically gets something plugged into his brain, and all of a sudden he knows 100 martial arts, and this is the way we would love to learn virtue, is to have something just plug into our brain, or maybe come to a Saturday morning workshop and just it plugs into our brain and we're more virtuous. Great, we don't have to do anything, we just enjoy acting more virtuously. Unfortunately, that's not really the way that most of us acquire virtue. It requires a little bit more than that. And there's a kind of a classical way of looking at virtue theory. It says that virtue is acquired first by glimpsing the goal that we want to get to. And that is, we have to see, okay, I want to be more forgiving. I want to be more humble. I want to be more hopeful. And, and we see that. We don't know exactly what that's going to mean to get there, but that's our goal. And so then we start trying to practice that virtue. It's hard, but we practice it, and we practice it as perfectly as we can until it becomes a habit of the heart. So it's something, it becomes something I don't have to think about. Many people who study habit formation think that it takes at least a month of concentrated effort to build a new habit. Which is why most of our New Year's resolutions fail, because we give extreme effort for about 2 days to the New Year's resolutions, and then go, nope, I can't do that. I'm giving up. So we practice until this virtue becomes a habit of the heart. But you know, maybe if I were wanting to build the virtue of courage, you know, I practice and practice. I think I'm going to be courageous, but if I don't get that virtue put under stress, if I don't get it tested and faced with trials and temptations and even suffering and doing the virtue in the midst of suffering, I don't know whether I really have acquired that virtue. So we have to glimpse the goal, practice perfectly until it becomes a habit of the heart, and then we have to successfully negotiate the tests and trials and temptations and suffering that put the virtue under strain. So that is a lot more convoluted, a lot more difficult task than just getting plugged in like Neo and learning 100 martial arts instantly. So this is just another slide that illustrates the same thing, glimpsing the goal. You're seeing some of my favorite literary works, Chariots of Fire, the movie, and Rocky. Rocky number 27. You know, I'm a pretty good boxer now because I've seen all 27 of the Rocky movies. So anyway, so this is what we want to do, is we want to have a framework that says that, well, if I am going to acquire these virtues, it is going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take facing up during hard times. Now, it turns out that cognitive psychology, or the psychology of how our mental processes work, that cognitive psychology can tell us some things about this habit formation that is going to be important. So one of the things that it tells us that's really an important idea, and you may know this, but one of the things is that most of our mental activity is not rational, logical, thoughtful type of mental activity. That's really only about 10% of all of our mental activity that's rational and logical and thoughtful. Most of the things that go on in our mind are automatic. They're intuitive. They happen faster than a speeding bullet. They're more powerful than a locomotive able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. They are unconscious. They are not rational, and they are driving what we are doing. In fact, I said about 10% of our mental activity is logical and rational, but about half of that is justifying that non-rational type of thinking that goes on in my mind. And I'm just putting reasons to it. So the implication of that is that if we're going to form new habits and new virtues, then it really isn't all about willpower and right thinking. Yeah, willpower and right thinking are important, and they at certain times when I get tested, I really need willpower. I really need right thinking. But the idea that is most helpful is that I need to use my rationality and logic strategically And the way that I do that is to kind of set things up rationally so that I don't have to confront a new decision and new willpower at every moment of my life. So this is going to really involve four things for our purposes. One of those, if I want to be, more virtuous, let's say more forgiving, then I need to choose models and heroes that inspire and instruct me. And I need to figure out, well, who are my models and heroes of forgiveness? Have I met people that I think are particularly forgiving? Or if I want to be more humble, you know, maybe I choose Nelson Mandela as being just an illustration of humility and forgiveness and hope from South Africa as he changed the entire country and had effect on the world. So I choose models and heroes that inspire me and instruct me for that virtue. Second, I need to use my rationality and logic to set up the environment so that I promote virtue. And that's done in many big ways, such as what kind of mate you choose, or who your friends are, or what kind of job you find yourself in, because those are the activities that structure much of our day. And therefore, if I structure those activities of my leisure time with my friends, with my time with my family, and with my job, I've put myself in a good position for most of the time that I'll spend on Earth. So a third thing that I do is situations come up that are temptations, and I need to choose those situations wisely. So I avoid moral temptations, and which is, if I'm on a diet, I want to, not drive by or not go into McDonald's and have a meeting with somebody because, the French fries will just, I don't know, they call me, they call my name, Everett, come and devour me. And so I just got to avoid those things. And the same way, if I'm trying to be more forgiving, I want to, maybe avoid the situations in which people put a lot of pressure on me to speak very vengefully about somebody who's hurt me. And then the fourth thing that I can do with rationality in using it strategically is to train ourselves in healthy, positive coping strategies. So I'm going to try to, apply that, and you might think of applying that as you're building virtues into your life, applying those four changes you can make right away to make a big difference. So I want to start by talking about forgiveness, humility, and hope with kind of the basic virtue, which is humility. Saint Augustine said that humility was the mother of all virtues, and I think a lot of people agree. I agree that that humility is really a fundamental virtue. So let me just talk a little bit about what humility is. I used to think that humility was defeating pride, and I used a picture or a story that I'd heard once from a motivational, a Christian motivational speaker named Tony Campola. Some of y'all may have, seen or heard Tony Campola. I remember sitting on the front row, in a Tony Campola talk, and he goes, "I pity you people on the front row because I spit when I talk," and and I would have to say that he's correct in that. But anyway, I think this story came from him. He was talking about a young man in college who was lifting weights in his room. trying to become really buff so he can impress people around campus. And after, lifting weights for a while, he passes the mirror, he looks in, he sees all these bulging muscles because they're all exercised, and he decides to go show this off. So he puts on a kind of one of the sleeveless shirts, and he heads over to the student commons. But before he goes to the student commons, he decides the scholar athlete is probably actually more impressive than just the athlete. And so he picks up a bunch of books, noticing that, they have the side benefit of making his biceps bulge even more. So so he goes over to the student commons. He gets himself an all-American health meal, which would be a burger, fries, and a shake. He's going back to his table, and on the way back to his table, he decides it'll look really cool since he's balancing these books in one hand, he's balancing his tray in the other hand. It'll look really cool if he was sipping milkshake. And so he leans down to sip his milkshake, and he's got a straw, and he, it hits his lip and it kind of bounces off. And he thinks, well, that's not cool. And so he's starting to chase the straw around the, around and around the cup. And, and no matter how he chases it, he can't catch it. And finally, he just gives up and throws himself at the straw and just lunges at it to try to get it in his mouth. It hits his lip and bounces off and lodges in his nostril. And so here he is, with a straw in his nostril, and thinking, now this is really not cool. Both hands are occupied, and he's shaking his head around. He pulls it out and slinging milkshake everywhere. Okay, well, the moral of that story is pride goes before a fall. So I used to think that humility is just, defeating pride. And I use that story with myself to kind of say, don't be so prideful. But it turns out that is probably not all that humility is. I was given an award once by the American Psychological Association, and what comes with that award was the chance to give a talk, an invited talk. And so I actually decided to speak on humility. It was we were doing research on humility. I'd never talked in a psychological meeting about humility before. So I put together this new talk. Always with new talks, I'm very...
You muted. You muted yourself. Got it.
Okay, I don't know where I was. I was invited to give this talk, and so it's a new talk on humility. So I went to rehearse it before the talk, and so I'm in the room next to the place where I'm going to give the talk, and I'm rehearsing, and finally people are gathering in the room next door, and so I head to the room right about the time for the session to start. And as I walked in the door and looked at like 400 people, all facing the stage, my fly of my pants caught on the door and just ripped the zipper, totally open. And so here I am, with my zipper open and looking at the back of all these people's heads. And I think, well, that's easy. I'll just hide behind the lectern. And then I looked up front. Now, I don't...
It was clear.
I looked up front.
Oh, wow.
Well, it turns out it wasn't exactly something I could hide behind. It was one of those plastic things. And so, I thought, well, I still have to give this talk. And so it's a 1-hour talk, and I face sideways and, and kind of, gestured sideways and leaning over, trying to protect the view. And after the talk, one of my friends came up to me and said, well, you know, it's a very nice talk. You know, I hadn't heard that before, but it's too bad about your recent deformity. So, you know, anyway, that turned out not to be humility. That was humiliation that I was experiencing right there. And, you know, actually, when I gave the talk, it was harder to hear from the back of the room the way that I positioned myself. So humility is not defeating pride. It's not, although we do defeat pride, it's not getting humiliated, although sometimes that can lead to forming some humility. But you know, I just thought that humility is something positive. It's not just the absence of pride. It's something positive. So this is a picture of my son with his first child, and you know, I think that kind of captures in a way what humility is. You know, it is an accurate picture of yourself, that you recognize and own that you have strengths and you have weaknesses and limitations, and you're willing to be teachable about those limitations. I know when I held my first child, and I don't want to go into how I gave my daughter a bath in the hospital and drew all of the nurses on the entire floor around to laugh at my way of dealing with a newborn infant. But you know, it's a willingness to be teachable. It's something positive. But of course, there's something public about humility also. So it requires a modest self-presentation. If I'm arrogant in my self-presentation, well, that's not going to help. And I think the key part of humility is that it actually is something that is oriented toward others, to lift others up instead of squashing them down. Now, I have to say that among people who study humility, that's probably about a 50%, that gets about 50% agreement. The other 50% would say, nah, you don't have to be oriented toward others. You just have to have a quiet ego. So somehow you have to quieten your ego. But I would say the way that we quieten our ego is we're oriented to building others up. So then there are four characteristics of humility that all are necessary, and you need all of them in order to build humility. So an accurate view of self, including awareness and acceptance of your strengths and weaknesses, teachability, a modest self-presentation, and an orientation toward others, to show power under control to lift others up and not squash them down. Now, it turns out there are a lot of different types of humility. General humility is it's a kind of a general view of yourself, a disposition in which you're going to show all of those characteristics many times in many situations. Spiritual humility is being humble in the face of what people call sacred. So many people, most people in the United States, call God sacred, but some people, you know, think of nature as being sacred, or humanity, or the sacred as something beyond us, something transcendent. So humility in the face of the sacred is spiritual humility. We have another type of humility called relational humility, which is a particular way that humility shows up in different types of relationships. So, for example, a humble spouse and a humble student don't really display all of the same characteristics. So It depends on what your relationship is as to how spirituality is shown. And cultural humility is a particular type of relational humility. It's humility in dealing with a different culture than mine. Intellectual humility involves the way that people relate to each other when they're sharing ideas that are very emotional. So political humility is remaining humble in that far part humble stance while sharing political ideas. Now, I'm going to actually talk about political humility because even though we're not always getting together quite as much at Thanksgiving as we usually do, and who knows what will happen around the other holidays um, because of this COVID situation. Nevertheless, we still get together with family and friends, and politics comes up, as does religious issues and racial and ethnic issues. So I'm going to talk about the intellectual humility of political humility a little later. Okay, so it gives us a general idea of humility that we were working from. And now let's talk about forgiveness. I think there are 4 types of forgiveness. So 2 of those we experience mostly from the standpoint of a wrongdoer. And one of those is divine forgiveness. So we experience the receiving of humility from God. And mostly that's because I need humility because I've done things against God. And so I need the divine forgiveness. Self-forgiveness also is mostly experienced as something that I experience as a wrongdoer. So when we do something that we are ashamed of or feel guilty about, we wrestle more with self-condemnation than we do from forgiving ourselves. So it's like, how do I deal with this self-blame and regret and remorse and shame and guilt that I feel? The other 2 types of humility, though, are experienced more from the point of view of a person who has been hurt, who has been offended. And the first of those is human to human forgiveness or individual to individual forgiveness. And the second of those is societal or social forgiveness. So, we need forgiveness, and I'm inviting you to kind of think right now. We won't take time because I don't think we have the ability really to discuss this, but if you just think to yourself, where do you see a need for forgiveness? There are so many troubled couples around, and then there are so many people that have family of origin issues where they've been hurt by one of their parents or some caregiver growing up. Many people belong to groups, churches, or other types of groups, and there are issues of people hurting each other within those groups. Workplaces. Now, of course, VCU, where I worked for 40 years, we never had any kind of issues within our workplace. And of course, if you believe that, it's a good thing I'm not talking about honesty today. So, but anyway, workplaces, all of these are areas where forgiveness shows up. So I just listed a few, such as marriages, families, workplace or school, families of origin, self-forgiveness, political differences. Well, we probably don't have very many of those today. Social issues, race relations, diversity issues, LGBTQ, civic discussions of all kinds.
Dr. Worthington?
Yes.
Hi, this is Gigi. You mentioned that we don't have the time or the way to discuss, but we would love to be able to maybe just ask a few people because you were saying you were giving some areas that forgiveness. So I would love to show you my camera so you could see the people that are here also that they, and if
Sure.
someone on Zoom wants to chime in.
Yeah.
By the way, this is amazing. So let me see if I can turn the camera off. Oh, shoot. Okay. I don't know how to.
No, the thing is that Dr. Everett, you said we don't have the ability to do the exercise to discuss it. You can, because everybody in the room can hear you and
Uh-huh.
everybody on Zoom can hear you. And if people in the room want to talk, you can hear them. And also the people on the Zoom, if they unmute themselves, we can have a little discussion about what forgiveness looks like. Yeah,
Right.
if you want.
Yeah,
If you
well,
want.
I know we can do that, and I know that there actually are ways on Zoom that I've been in places that have set up groups, where little small groups on Zoom can talk to each other. So I know that there's the technological ability. I didn't know if you wanted to use the time that way, but if you do, go ahead.
So does anybody want to share?
Does anyone has a question or wants to share something at this point?
What was his question?
His question. Yeah, his
Yeah, what was
question
his
was,
question?
where do you see yourself? Where do you see
A need of
a
forgiveness.
need to forgive in the areas that you showed in divine self, human, and social?
So does so can you come here so you can be,
Oh, no.
but quítate la mano.
Yeah.
Say hello to everyone.
Hi. So in what area I will say I need for self-forgiveness is a big one for me. Very hard to forgive myself. It's more easy for me to forgive other people than, but I'm working on it.
Thank you, Maria. Anybody else wants to share, say something?
I can't unmute myself.
So I think we just continue.
And if anybody wants to join or say anything on Zoom, just go ahead and raise your hands or do a thumbs up and Emmanuel will unmute you so that you guys can actually present your questions. But just go ahead and I don't know if they have thumbs up or something. Okay, thanks. This is not working.
Okay, so I think we just continue, yeah? So it's all yours again, Dr. Everett.
All right. So I was mentioning some things that have come up are, the way that conflict leads to unforgiveness. Past conflicts happen in groups, and the past conflicts that don't get resolved and forgiven often, then make it more difficult to deal with new issues that come up. Condo owners, I know that down in Southern Florida, I used to go down there to work to write books every summer at a condo that my brother-in-law had, who was working up in Connecticut, but he let me use his condo. And I know that they had just a knockdown brawl practically over whether to require modifications to the condo. And of course, everybody had to pay for them. So some people couldn't afford to pay for them, but they voted to do that. And so that ended up being a bitter conflict. But other kinds of issues, political, theological differences, problems with leaders. Now, we don't have any problems with leaders in the United States. Fortunately, we're immune to that. But other organizations, tend to have leaders that arouse strong feelings in people that they're making decisions that affect. Interpersonal interactions, of course, where people say things that hurt each other or are in relationships that are conflicted, like conflicted marriages or even friendships that you have a falling out. So there are a lot of a lot of areas in which people develop unforgiveness in life. And, I wanted to just talk about a couple of my personal experiences with forgiveness. I just will say that forgiveness can be a dramatic thing, or it can be a very small thing. So this is a kind of a metaphor. If we're in Atlanta and we're headed looking at Las Vegas, so there's nothing metaphorical, of course, about the city of Las Vegas, but let's just say we're in Atlanta and we're looking at Las Vegas. Some dramatic changes in our relationship could be like turning around and going in a total opposite direction, like to Norfolk, Virginia. And it's a big change. It's dramatic. We notice it right away. But other changes in forgiveness don't necessarily happen dramatically. They can be a small change, but down the road, as we follow on with this different relationship, it can make a big difference. So instead of ending up in Las Vegas, we could end up in Denver or Phoenix. Big differences that take place with small changes down the road. So I call forgiveness the hard virtue. Forgiveness occurs within our skins. It's something that I experience. I call it hard because life is hard. And if we live long enough, I'm sure we'll all come into dealing with many of these hard issues over life. So one of the experiences I had was back in 1996, my mother was murdered. I'd lost my father about 7 years before to cancer, and my mom lived alone. She didn't drive. It was a New Year's Eve night, and she went to bed early, and a young man broke into her house thinking no one was home because no lights were on. It was New Year's Eve. He expected that everybody probably was gone to a New Year's Eve party. And he breaks into the house, and when my mom finally wakes up, he ended up bludgeoning her with a crowbar. So I, was faced at that point. I'd been studying forgiveness for about 10 years or so, and I was faced with the hard point of, can I forgive this young man? Now, of course, what happened was I spent the first 24 hours in a rage against this young man who would break into a house and kill an old woman. And I never allowed myself to think of the word forgiveness for almost 24 hours. So what happened was I was alone, and I was alone at my aunt's house, and was all right. So I was alone at my aunt's house, and I was thinking about earlier in the night. I had walked around like 4 hours just in a rage, and I sat down to kind of do something productive and write a eulogy for my mom, since I was the oldest child, and I realized I had not thought about forgiveness in 24 hours. And I thought, well, here I am, a Christian. Here I am, a person who's written books on forgiveness and done research on forgiveness, and yet I'm not thinking about forgiveness. I need to practice this. And so so I started using that reach forgiveness model that I developed that I think Bob Eamons talked about a few weeks back. And I started thinking about what it must be like for a young man on New Year's Eve to be out in the cold in Knoxville, Tennessee, looking at this dark house, thinking he's going to commit a perfect crime. And then he goes in, and this woman comes out and confronts him. And it not only is it not, did she spoil his perfect crime, but she's seeing his face, and he's probably going to go to jail. So he's got this anger and anxiety and fear, and he's got an impulse control problem. He's holding a crowbar he used to break the window, and he hits her until she dies. Well, you know, I suddenly flash back to earlier in the night when I had been talking to my brother and sister. My brother found the body. I was talking to my brother and sister, and we were putting together what the police had come up with over the day. And I got so angry, I pointed to a baseball bat against the wall and said, I wish whoever did that were here. I would take that baseball bat and beat his brains out. He wouldn't last 30 minutes. My brother said he wouldn't last 10 minutes if I got a hold of him. My sister said, well, I'd make him last an hour if I got a hold of him. We were all furious. And yet, you know, now here, you know, I was thinking of this young man who had committed this crime, who had responded out of anger and fear that he's going to go to jail. And I, this Christian, this, you know, person who studied forgiveness, was willing to take a baseball bat and beat somebody's head in. And I just, you know, couldn't help but be confronted with the thought that whose heart is darker here? You know, mine or this young man? And I felt like, well, my heart is darker. And yet I knew I could be forgiven if I, you know, went to God with this. And I thought, well, if I can be forgiven for the darkness of my heart, then who am I to hold on to unforgiveness against this young man? And I was able to forgive that young man and hold on to that. Well, of course, those stories, you know, that happen like that don't just end. I spent the next 10 years, very soon after that, I changed my life mission to do all I could do to promote forgiveness in every willing heart, home, and homeland. And about 10 years after my mom was murdered, my brother committed suicide. And the reason, of course, was that he had discovered the body of my mom, and he was having post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I'm a clinical psychologist. And so when I talked with Mike about this, and you know, I tried to help him. I tried to say, Mike, it sounds like that, you know, mentioning that you get depressed and you get alone and you turn the lights out and you stay for 14 hours and on a Saturday in your room in the dark, that sounds like you're having a post-traumatic stress disorder. You need to get some counseling about that. My dad didn't really think much of counselors, and so he kind of poisoned the mind of folks in our family against counselors. And so my brother, when I said that he might benefit by some counseling, he said, I'm not going to any shrink. So he says this to his shrink brother, right? Which lets you know a little something about our relationship growing up. I was an older brother and kind of made life miserable for my younger brother. And I persisted. I said, Mike, you know, if you haven't gotten over this in 10 years, you're probably not going to get over it soon unless you do something very different. I think you need to get some counseling. And he said, I'm not going to any blankety blank shrink, and I don't want to hear any more about it. And so you know, being a clinical psychologist and knowing all about resistance and how people, you know, resist, you know, did I behave in a professional way? Did I use the knowledge I had accumulated over the 30 years of practice at that point? No, I didn't. I responded just like a hormone crazed teenager. And when he said, you know, I don't want to hear any more about it, I went, well, whatever. And I didn't bring it up again. And within a couple of months, he had committed suicide. And I felt a lot of self-condemnation because I didn't use the skills that I had. I got provoked into a family, kind of automatic family pattern there. And so that led to me really developing a way of dealing with self-forgiveness that involved 3 preliminary steps of taking the matter to God, trying to do all I could to repair the damage that I've done, and then trying to psychologically deal with the damage I've done psychologically by my wrongdoing or the reason that I'm down on myself. If once I've done those things, then I can apply that reach forgiveness model to myself, and then I can struggle with accepting myself as being someone who is flawed enough to do the thing that I'm ashamed of. And then getting past that, I can choose not to try to repeat those mistakes. So I developed this method of dealing with self-forgiveness, ended up writing a book about it and doing experiments on it. But it turned out I was having some spiritual struggles myself. And I didn't even know that I was having spiritual struggles with this until about 2 years after my brother had committed suicide. I'd already forgiven myself for this, but I had kind of gotten cold toward God. And I went to a conference and I heard this psychologist from Australia talk, Maureen Miner. We happened to be staying in the same hotel, and so we arrived back at the same time, and we got in the elevator together, headed up, and it turns out we're going to the same floor. And she said, you know, well, Ev, I understand that your brother committed suicide a couple of years ago. How are you doing with that? Now, she's a psychoanalyst. And my answer to her was, well, fine. I'm doing fine. So this is like a hint, you know. If you ever find yourself in a locked space with a psychoanalyst who asks you a really emotionally loaded question, the answer fine is not really usually the best answer you can give, because that just provokes the psychoanalyst, you know, and she just raised one eyebrow, kind of like Mr. Spock in you know, the Star Trek, and goes, really? And so I started talking about this, and the more I talked, the more I could see, almost as if I were outside of myself, that I was going through a spiritual struggle with God, and I didn't want to do that. And so I went back to my hotel room and then tried to start making that relationship right again. Well, it turns out that most people go through times of spiritual struggle in their life. Robert Wuthnow, a sociologist at Princeton, talks about how most of our life is spent in spiritual dwelling, that is, in a kind of a common, a stable place. But sometimes events toss us into periods of seeking, in which we're trying to figure out things, and that leads to one of 3 outcomes. One of those is to kind of leave the place that I've been. Another is to get caught in a loop of just kind of continued seeking and I never resolve. And the third is to resolve it in a way that brings me back into a place where I was, but in a different place. He said it's like a spiral, not like a circle. It's like I come back to a different place. Well, okay, let's talk just a little about what is forgiveness. And I'm going to start with really a very important definition, and this is what we call the injustice gap. When I get hurt or offended, I experience it as an injustice. And this injustice gap is the difference between the way I see things right now and the way I would like to see things if they were resolved to my satisfaction. So if that gap is small, like somebody bumps me in the street, there's not much repair that's necessary. I can deal with that injustice pretty quickly. I probably have forgotten it by the time I get down the street. But if the gap is large, then I have a lot more trouble dealing with it. And so I continue to keep adjusting that injustice gap depending on what happens. And I'll just give you a little personal anecdote to show you what I mean by this. I 4 or 5 years ago, I had to teach a psychology 101 class. 305 excited, inquiring minds want to know about psychology. And this is the first day of class for the semester. It's in August in Richmond. And I like coffee. And so I get up in the morning and I drink a pot of coffee. I drink a pot of coffee. I don't know why this went, I didn't touch anything. I'm going to trust that you all can restore this. So I drink a pot of coffee.
Sorry. Dr. Worthington, we stopped your sharing just so that we could see your face for a little bit while you're sharing the story. And then just go ahead and share your screen when you're done with this part of the sharing. We wanted to see your nice face.
We have someone here. She wanted to share something with you. Her name's Kathy.
Okay.
Kathy, look over here.
The cat over there.
Oh, hi. Hi, how are you?
Hey.
I was listening to your story about your mom, and I was really relating to it because it's going to be 4 years my son was murdered. And the odd thing, I've been coming to these classes with Giovanna and Lucky for like 4 years, over 4 years, I think. July will be 5. And it was his best friend who was living in the home. And the kid, I loved him as if he was another son to me. So when I went to the first arraignment in the courtroom, I was very nervous. And I brought my daughter with me. And they brought him out in handcuffs. I didn't know what I was going to feel. I had no clue. So when I looked up to see him, I was shaking. I was so nervous. I instantly, like a snap of a finger, I looked at my daughter and I said, I don't hate him. I hate what he did, but I don't hate him. Instantly. And I learned here that forgiveness is from God, because I surely didn't choose that emotion. It just was the way it was. So I hate what happened to my son every day, but I don't know. There was never such anger that I wanted to get even. I wanted to see him suffer. I wanted to see him. I never had any of those feelings unbeknownst to me. Like I didn't bring that up upon myself, you know, That was just what it was. And I decided that if it didn't come naturally to me, I wasn't going to invoke hate and anger upon myself. So I just, through the help of this group, I had very, very good support through that time. And that's how I got through it. And then the funny thing I just shared in group the other night was a coworker had like backstabbed me, badmouthed me to my boss, and just to make herself look better because she felt that inadequate about herself. And the anger I have for her is 10 times larger. And I found that very odd. Like, how can I have so much anger and rage to this one woman when I didn't even have it for the man who took my son's life? I thought that was very odd and weird, and I had to bring it to the group because I found it astounding my own self. So, but I was relating to your story, and it's a lot going on in my head. I just wanted to share my experience of God's grace of forgiveness, because again, I didn't choose that. It just was what it was, and I left it alone.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kathy, for sharing. I will often say to people that, I was able to forgive the murderer of my mom within 24 hours, but that doesn't mean I'm some kind of super forgiver, because I had a professor once who gave me a B. Can you imagine that? He gave me a B. And it took 10 years and a spiritual experience to forgive him. It's the same thing, I mean, why? I believe God is always at work, helping us forgive. And that we have, that supernatural empowerment of the Holy Spirit that is acting on us, whether we're Christians or not. First book that we wrote is To Forgive is Human. It's like knowledge. It's like, all kinds of, it's like love. People can forgive whether they're Christians or not, but God is, I think, at work in all of those, regardless of whether we attribute, the power of forgiveness to God or not. And I just don't know why sometimes it seems so effortless, and other times it seems like such a struggle. And I've only studied this for about 40 years now, but I can't figure things out like that. So. Yeah, thank you, Kathy, for sharing. Well, so I was explaining this injustice gap. And so this injustice gap is, if it's a big injustice gap, it's hard to deal with. A small injustice gap, easy to deal with. And we modify it as we go along. And basically what happens is if somebody apologizes to us, we know that takes a lot of effort. We know that is not something they enter into easily. And so that reduces the size of our injustice gap. If they take responsibility for what they did, that reduces it. If they go to, if somebody steals something from me and they get caught, that reduces it. If they refuse to take responsibility, that increases the size of the gap. It makes it harder to forgive. So this calculation that we're doing internally without consciously thinking about it is always there, making forgiveness something easier or harder for us to do. And not just forgiveness, but rather any way of dealing with the injustice I've experienced. So I'm going to go back to the slides here, and I'm going to oops. This was my little shot of me having my first cup of coffee in the morning. And, you know, I didn't share this story, but we have a lot of options to deal with injustice. Forgiveness is only one of the many options that we have. One option we have of dealing with forgiveness is successful revenge. Now, I don't know how many people have seen Princess Bride. Has anybody seen Princess Bride? Yeah, okay, some, you know, well, here is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. Successful revenge is his way. And if you've seen the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, you know, he goes about with a lot of revenge also to deal with his injustice gap. But also I could see justice done. So if I see the person caught, that lowers the gap. If I see them tried, that lowers the gap. If I see them sentenced or convicted and sentenced, that lowers the gap. All of these are ways of dealing with injustice. I could turn the matter over to God. I can turn the matter over to God for divine justice, you know, with a prayer like, you know, God, you exact justice on them. Or I could turn the matter over to God, just, this is not my problem. This is yours, God. You deal with it. I could forbear. Forbearance is just, I'm not going to respond to this. I'm not going to respond in an angry, vengeful way because, you know, that's not good for the group. So this is a very popular way of dealing with things over in Asian countries, Japan, China, Korea. I could accept and move on. Life is too short to be unforgiving and bitter. I'm moving on with life. So there are lots of ways that we have to deal with unforgiveness and injustice. Forgiveness is only one of those. And, you know, the good news is that sometimes that injustice gap seems so big, I can't possibly ever get past it. That forgiving won't get me with a closed injustice gap. But the good news is that forgiveness doesn't have to do all of the heavy lifting. There can be some amount of that gap taken care of with getting justice or seeing justice, and some amount by just turning it over to God, some amount by forbearing, some by accepting. And then forgiveness can be used to deal with a smaller gap. So we can mix and match all of these things. We don't have to rely just on forgiveness. Well, what is forgiveness? Well, we know very well what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not the same thing as forbearing. It's not just not responding negatively. It's not condoning what was done. That is, it's not saying, yeah, you were right in doing what you did. It's not reconciling with the other person. That is, if a woman is getting beaten up by her husband, she can forgive him because that takes place inside her skin. But that doesn't mean she has to go back and put herself in danger and live with this guy again. So reconciliation is restoring trust in a relationship. And that's only going to happen if both people are trying to be trustworthy. And if one is not going to be trustworthy, then reconciliation is not going to happen. Forgiveness is not the same thing as forgetting. In fact, if I've forgotten it, I can't forgive it because it's forgotten. So I forgive, which is remembering, but remembering differently. Forgiveness is not justifying what was done to me. It's not saying, yeah, he was toilet trained too early. That's why he said those terrible things. It's not getting justice or seeing justice done. It's not excusing what was done. So we know very well what forgiveness is not. What is it? Well, this is key. There are two types of forgiveness. This is something that people often don't understand, but one of those types of forgiveness is an intention statement about how I intend to act toward the person who hurt me. I am not going to get revenge. I'm going to treat this person as a valued and valuable person, or if they're not alive anymore, that's the way I have chosen I would treat them. So that's called decisional forgiveness. It's not an actual behavior, although that actual behavior usually follows, because I could make this statement that I'm going to treat this person as a valuable and valued person, but tonight this person gets hit by a car someplace and I never get to carry this out. I've still forgiven this person. I've still made a decision to forgive. But I can make a decision to forgive and still be emotionally upset every time I hear or think about this event. I can feel resentment and bitterness and hostility and hate and anger and fear. I can feel all of the emotions that make up unforgiveness. And so that suggests there has to be a second type of emotion. That's a different type of emotion than just making a decision to forgive. And we call that emotional forgiveness. Emotional forgiveness is defined as replacing negative, unforgiving emotions with positive, other-oriented emotions. So when I replace those emotions, what I basically am doing is like neutralizing the negativity. So I start to experience more positive things, but I don't feel positive toward this person. I just feel less negative. It's as if I've got this acid of unforgiveness in my stomach, and I start adding a base to neutralize it. I neutralize it bit by bit by bit until it becomes totally neutral. Now, if this is a stranger or someone that I don't care if I continue a relationship with, then I'm usually content that getting to zero and feeling nothing toward this person is full forgiveness. But if this is an important relationship, a valued relationship in my life, I'm usually not content to just stop at I feel nothing. Imagine if my wife had hurt my feelings, which she never would do, of course, but if she did, and I told her, listen, I have forgiven you to where I feel nothing toward you. That's not going to cut it. I want to keep going until I feel positive toward her again. So there's these two different types of forgiveness. They are not two halves of one forgiveness. They are two different types of forgiveness: to make a decision about how I'm going to act and to change my emotion. I neutralize the negative, unforgiving emotion by experiencing positive, other-oriented emotions. You can see why humility is important, because that's so other-oriented, to lift the other person up, to feel empathy for this person who hurt me, sympathy, compassion, some kind of altruistic or agape love, or even romantic love. Those are the emotions that neutralize the negativity of resentment and bitterness and get rid of the emotional unforgiveness. Now, this is helped by other types of non-self-focused emotion like gratitude, thanksgiving, humility, or hope. So, in summary, there are two types of forgiveness: decision to forgive and emotional forgiveness. Why should we forgive? Well, it turns out there are a lot of reasons why we should forgive. For example, holding unforgiveness is very, very costly. It's costly in terms of my relationships, in terms of my mental health, and in terms of my physical health. So there are benefits to forgiving, and those benefits are better relationships. If I forgive a person, I will not automatically reconcile my relationship. If it's dangerous to reconcile or impossible to reconcile because the person's died, I won't reconcile. But forgiving gives me a yearning to reconcile. It gives me a yearning to make the relationship better. And so it does lead to better relationships. It also leads to better spiritual well-being, especially if in Christian circles where we know that we should forgive. That is, we should make a decision to forgive. I don't think God really mandates that we emotionally forgive, because that's just too hard in some cases. If I am getting hurt day after day after day after day by a bitter boss that is just always hurting me, I'm never going to get my emotions to go back to zero, but I can keep making 70 times 7. I can make decisions to forgive. And I think that's what Jesus calls us to. Forgiveness leads to better mental health because it reduces rumination. So rumination is playing things over and over again in my mind, and kind of like playing the Late Show in this terrible B-level movie. It doesn't get any better with reruns. And rumination is basically involved in every kind of major mental health disorder. So people who have anger disorders, rumination is the key to it. Depression, rumination is the key. Anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, psychosomatic disorders. Rumination is what I think of as the universal bad boy of mental health. It's like if we get a chance to ruminate, best not to do that. So what forgiveness does is it reduces the amount of rumination that we do. It kind of settles things and stops us from ruminating, which leads to better mental health, better well-being, less mental health symptoms. And then finally, forgiveness leads to better physical health. There are about 1,000 studies on forgiveness and physical health. Basically, if I am unforgiving towards someone, it will affect every system in my body. It will shrink my brain. It will damage my hippocampus in my brain, which consolidates memory, so it affects memory. It will affect my cardiovascular system, put me more at risk for cardiovascular problems. It will affect my immune system. It will affect my sexual and reproductive system, my digestive system. Basically, it affects every system in your body. Unforgiveness does. So forgiving improves our health, and there's 1,000 studies on this. All right. I think this might be a good place to just kind of stop. I think maybe Gigi or Lucky or someone wanted to say some things in the middle, and I was supposed to stop kind of in the middle. Is this a good time?
Can they hear me? Okay. Giorgio, can we stop sharing his screen? Thank you.
Go ahead.
And Joey, you can look over here.
Oh, sorry, look over there. That was very good, Dr. Everett. Thank you so much. Lot of information.
I think we should give him a round of applause. How about that? This is actually a lot of information. And it's like, this is one of those things like, oh my God, I wish I could hold this, like truly hold on to it. It's just so amazing sharing your own personal experience, because I think at times we're like, okay, it's easier for him to talk, you know, he's just done research, but for you to be vulnerable and just share also your experiences. I mean, I'm sorry you had to go through that in life, but I think it helps saying that you see, you just said it, forgiveness is human, you know, and there's just so much that you've said that is so good, you know, and one of the things I just love to, and I really enjoyed, is how you say that forgiveness doesn't have to carry the whole weight.
Right.
You know, there's other little things that we can implement to make forgiveness much more easier, you know? So I think that's a wonderful little tool, that nuggets that we can all take and put into practice. So again, we truly want to thank you for being here. We want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk to this unknown group of people. At least you're sitting in your home and you don't have to worry about any zippers or anything like that. You're sitting down, so it's not a problem. But I just wanted to also thank everyone that joined us, and everyone that's here live, and everyone that's joining us in Zoom. And again, you know, we would not be able to bring amazing speakers like this if it was not because of your generosity, because of you willingness to share with us, and to maintain our doors open. You know, we're a fully non-profit organization. We have no grants. We have no one supporting this other than you guys. And I think at the level that we are, I think it's just so, I just get amazed all the time to see how much, because relatively we're a small ministry, and how much and how many people have been able to come through here, and how many people have come and drop nuggets and information and stuff that just help us in life to become better people, and to learn virtues, like Dr. EW said, I'm not going to say the name, said earlier, and to add to that, and just to learn how to make those decisions. I love that at the beginning when he said, we got to want to do something different, you know, and I think that can be applied to everything we do, whether we need to forgive, whether we need to stop behaviors that are damaging us and our families. Wherever you are in life, I think just becoming aware and coming with a plan and saying, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. And then doing that part, you know, like changing those behaviors, you know, in our neuropath system and all that. So I just think, you know, to be able to have all this information to continue to learn, it's amazing. So thank you again, all of you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for continuing to allow us to have this platform to do this. And, you know, can we put it up? You know the drill. Many of you that are here for the first time, welcome. Those that are regulars and come here all the time, also welcome. And these are the different ways of sharing. And, you know, the text giving, you text the amount to that number. You text to that number and you write the word hope, the amount and the word hope. It's right there. We have PayPal, which is Hope4Life, Miami.org. Click on donate. It has to say Miami.org. Otherwise, it goes to another entity.
Fashionable showing her temple.
Oh, by Cash App, which is $ Hope4Life Miami. Some people find that super easy. Or you, like Susan just showed her checkbook, she's writing a check. And those that write checks, we do get them, and you mail them to our address, which is Hope4Life. And the address is right there, 11715 Southwest 87th Avenue. So do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone, we're getting towards the end of the year. Like Giovanna said, we don't have a big church, we don't have a big ministry, we don't have grants, we don't have the government backing us. People before you all has made it possible for you all to be here, and maybe you all will make it possible for everybody else. Do you want to leave that? No, it's not. For everybody else to be here. So, you know, I just want everybody to keep that in mind. Also, anybody wants tax breaks, we're at the end of the year. I want to remind everyone, the building is for sale. Bethor is talking about selling it. We're thinking about buying it. So that's another thing that's going on over here. You know, I just want to talk about the practical side of it all, yeah?
But we still, because some people do have asked what's going on with the building. We haven't come to any resolution. We're still negotiating with them, and we'll see. But regardless, we're just taking it one day at a time, because if it doesn't work, then somebody else buys the building. We will have to find a new place, a new home for us to do this. So nevertheless, regardless whether we buy it or not, I think that's something we can all keep in prayer, just to go smooth. And if it's not here, that God will provide another amazing place like he did with this beautiful place that we have. So
and also in while everybody's on Zoom and here, we're not meeting next Thursday, and we're not meeting next Saturday. Not just talking about the giving. So if you guys we only ask on Saturdays and we only ask on Thursdays, you guys keep in mind that everything will keep running and the expenses will keep running, even though we're not meeting next Thursday because it's Thanksgiving, and we're not meeting next Saturday. So all this is free, but all this costs us a fortune. It's all free for all of you, but it all costs a fortune to keep everything running, you know, to have speakers come, just everything, to have the one-on-one meetings, everything costs a lot of money. So,
and we are grateful that we have the ability to be able to provide these at no cost. And as long as we can do it, we will continue to do it. And there's many of you that make that possible. And we just want to say again, thank you. We truly appreciate it.
And I really want to thank everyone who makes all this possible. Because there's a lot of people hidden behind the scene that y'all never seen, never met. You don't even know they exist. They want to remain anonymous. They don't want to be known. And they make a big part of this possible. Yeah? And we want to thank them.
Yes,
right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
So can
Gigi.
we have Gigi?
Oh,
Gigi's
wait.
gonna share with us some.
Eric was gonna, nobody, okay. You done, Eric?
Yeah, he did.
Did
Okay.
anyone here, envelopes? Yeah. And
He did that.
Okay, thank
okay.
you, yeah, Eric.
Gigi.
It's so weird.
I don't know if everyone's thinking, but I feel everyone a little mellow today. I don't know why. Like,
Oh, it's forgiveness. You don't want to forgive. You want to
No.
hold on to the grudge.
Who wants to forgive? Raise your hand. Oh,
here.
oh, wow. You all want to forgive? Good, good. Excellent, excellent. Let's work on it. You know, it's funny because I was saying to GT and Giorgio and Emmanuel this morning before everybody was here. It's amazing. We all want an incantation. We all want to blame the devil. We all want to blame everybody else. Oh, thank you. Is that a yes or no? You don't know. Oh.
Don't want to do the work.
Thank you. Vivi just said, want to forgive, but don't want to do the work. It's amazing. This healing stuff there's no formula. There's no secret sauce. There's no one book. We want deep inner healing. We want freedom. I was saying, sorry. No, they can hear me. But we don't want to do the work.
hard.
We want the Holy Spirit to do the work, and we want to sit there and watch him do it, or her actually. That's a whole nother conversation. I won't go there.
Okay, how about Gigi goes?
Okay. No, I just wanted to say that, because this forgiveness stuff is really, really hard. Everything we do at Hope for Life is really, really hard. We don't have incantations for it.
What's incantation?
Formulas,
Spells,
magic dust,
wand.
voodoo, woo, Twilight Zone stuff.
Casting it out.
Casting it out. We can't cast it out.
Magic pill.
We can't cast it out. Jack Frost used to say, there is no casting this out. It's Romans 5:5. It has to be refilled with the love of the Father. Romans 5:5. Read Romans 5:5. No, I'm just telling you, Vivi. Okay.
Refilled. That's
Sorry.
nice.
No, I just,
It's like a refill. I like that.
yeah, Giovanna wants me to sit down.
No, you can stay here with us. Just stand your ground.
No, I can let him push me a little bit. It's funny that you, Dr. Everett, thank you so much for today. I think we all can give him a round of applause. And it's also like, again, drinking from a fire hydrant, right? I think we're gonna take this and we should ruminate on this better, right? Let's ruminate on his notes. But you said something about rumination that I wanted to say, that when we're in the support groups on Thursdays, I think that that's our place to get rid of our rumination. And I thank you for saying that, because a lot of us have had that story or different stories stuck in our heads, right? So how do we get rid of that story that we keep playing over and over, the same cassette over and over, and what they did to us and what they said to us?
You stay too behind.
I'm a cassette player. I'm an 80s. I'm an 80s child. So. We have to change what? The DVD? I don't know, what do we change? Change the cassette. Change the tape. But yeah, I just want to invite anyone who's here for the first time. I'm seeing at the people on Zoom, and I know I have a friend here, Betty Flores. I want to give you a shout out. Thank you for being with us today. And I see Giancarlo. I'm so glad that you're here, and all of you. We do meet also on Thursday, so I want to invite everyone who hasn't participated in the support groups. We meet Thursdays at 7 p.m. via Zoom. You can go to our website and get all that information at hope4lifemiami.org. But we're not going to meet this Thursday. So if we could have that slide, Giorgio, about this Thursday. This week is going to be really Thanksgiving week. So Thursday, we will not be meeting for support group. I know I just invited you to support group, but save the date for the Thursday after. And this Thursday, this Saturday also, we will not have class. And also, we usually have on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, we have a beautiful picnic, lunch, potluck. This year, we're not going to do it for obvious reasons. We want to keep everyone safe and healthy. So unfortunately, we're not going to spend that time together, but we'll figure something out for next year. Another reminder is that we have Shiloh Place. Oh, wait, yeah. Shiloh Place is going to have a 4-day interactive webinar. For some of you who don't know who Shiloh Place is, it's the ministry of Jack Frost. And if you don't know who Jack Frost is, you can Google him. It's not the little character from Winter and Wonderland. But he is one of the fathers, if not the father, of inner healing and healing the father's love and our orphan heart. So,
though it's funny though, because it's comical. Jack Frost,
yeah.
mentor, who mentored him, was called Jack Winter. Jack Winter was like, he says he was like 5'6" feet, and Jack Frost was 6.5 feet, so picture that. Jack Frost with Jack Winter, so it is comical.
Yeah, it is. I laugh inside. I'm so glad you brought it. So if you haven't registered, it's not through Hope for Life, but we are promoting them because we believe in, like you were saying this morning, all of us should be there. We should all participate. Yeah, can you see it on Zoom? So if you're watching on Zoom, take a picture, visit their website and sign up. They have limited spaces for the group. There's two ways to go in. You have the seminar, but you also have the seminar with the groups. I suggest you go in with the one with the groups. And I know some people here have already registered. Good for you. We're so proud of you. And I think I have one more announcement. Yes. So we're not here next Saturday, but we will continue our classes the Saturday after. And we're going to have a really, really good class called Behaviors and Patterns of the Dysfunctional Family. How many people here have grew up in a dysfunctional family? How many people have a dysfunctional family?
How many people are dysfunctional?
How many people are dysfunctional? Yay. like a roller coaster. Woo. Like Giovanna taught us through the bottled up family that there is no functional family. We're all dysfunctional in recovery, one way or another, or with denial. So we invite you to save the date and participate, whether it's in person or with Zoom, on Saturday, December 5th at 9 a.m. We'll be back over here.
And you know, Gigi is the one that makes in Georgia all these little squares and little things that are so cute. So let's give them a round of applause. So they make us look so fancy and professional, and I can barely put on the computer. Whoever one sees all these will think we're like, wow, these people, and I cannot even put on a computer. So there you go. So they're the ones that make us look so professional. So thank you, Gigi and Giorgio. So I think that's it.
We're good to
So
go.
thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening to all this. And Dr. Everett is still, it's now back to you. And
I had a little thought before, Dr. Everett, you mentioned when you were sharing your story about your brother who said to you, I'm not going to go see a shrink, right? Sometimes we talk here at Hope4Life about stories or things that our family tell us that we believe. Like, I think it's a stronghold, right? And after the class that we're giving on December 5th, we're going to be talking about secrets. We're going to be talking about strongholds. And then we're going to have, I think, 5 or 6 weeks of forgiveness classes. After today's class with you, I think we're probably going to expand our lessons in forgiveness. But I think to pay attention to those things that we believe from our family, things that we heard, is important. In my family, because of culture, Lebanese and Colombian, I always hear and heard, I'm never going to forgive fill in the blank. Or I'm very Lebanese, so I'm never going to forgive blank. And I heard that all my life. So just thought I would share it. I don't know who had to hear it, but that's it. Bye.
Thank you. So it's all back to you again. Thank you.
Right. I'm back. So I have a lot of things that I'd like to do.
Dr. Everett, hold on 1 second. So it's okay. She's dying of embarrassment, but it's okay.
Hi, I just wanted to know like the reach that he keeps mentioning it.
Oh, you will?
Oh, is he gonna go over it?
Are you going to go over the reach model?
I will go over it a little bit, but you know, since it was mentioned that Bob Emmons went over it in more detail, I didn't plan on going over it a lot, but I am going to go over the steps and kind of show you where to find more about it.
Okay, thank you. Because I think some people that were are here were not here for that time. So, you know, just a little bit, because yeah, some people have been asking, what is that reach model? So
Okay, well, yeah, I have enough in there to show people where to go to get a lot about it.
No, but ask him to explain it because it's he invented it.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so So I have a lot that I'd like to cover in the last hour or so. I'd like to have a chance to talk for a while about political humility, a little bit about hope, and a little more about forgiveness. So I'm going to start off with forgiveness, but don't get alarmed if I start just throwing through slides. We'll be coherent enough, I think, that you can understand what's going on. But I can see already I'm only halfway through my slides, but I'm 2/3 through my time. So I'll be skipping some slides. So let's look. Remember, I said there are two types of forgiveness. One is to make a decision about how we're going to act toward the person, and that I think that this is the type of forgiveness that Christians that I would say are required of us as Christians. But I would say that God desires for us to have emotional forgiveness. Although sometimes just because of circumstances, that's not really possible. But the reach forgiveness model is about how to get more emotional forgiveness for the most part. So why might we be motivated to make a decision to forgive? Well, other than the fact that it's better for our relationships and better for our spiritual life and better for our mental health and better for our physical health, what I did was I read a couple of books that share a lot of forgiveness stories. So if you're interested in reading stories of just folks forgiving, these are both good books. One by Amy Newmark. This is a Chicken Soup for the Soul type series, about 101 stories about how to let go and change your life. It's about forgiveness. And Marina Catacusino, who is a British woman who collects stories in the Forgiveness Project. So I read these couple of books, and I tried to decide, how do people who are just telling their stories about how they forgave, how did they make that decision? And one of the things that, as a conclusion from that is that, I need to decide that I don't really have the power to womp up forgiveness on my own. Sometimes I can do that, and we are in a collaboration with God, but God does empower this forgiveness. So people decide, I can't do this. I'm going to give it over to God, who does have the power. Another thing in making a decision to forgive is I have to give up a lot of expectations that I have about the offender and about the offense. So what expectations? Well, something like, I can do something to earn this person's love. Well, it's really hard to be able to do enough to earn anybody's love if they're not willing to give that love. An expectation, I'll recover all that's lost or taken from me by the offender's acts. I probably won't. Offender will change and be as I would like them to be. This person will come to justice. A lot of people hurt us and they never really experience any kind of sense of justice. Or my personal favorite, this person will grovel before me and vindicate me. Yes, that's always happened. I can count on the number of fingers I don't have up right now, that the number of times that people have come and groveled when they've wronged me. So how do we give up those expectations and replace them by a decision to forgive? Well, there are things that help. And the reason they help often is because they change that injustice gap. So I can be more likely to make a decision to forgive if the offender shows evidence of change of some sort. So if the offender accepts responsibility, or says, I understand how I hurt you, and shows that they have empathy for me. They give a good apology. They try to make amends for having hurt me. They try to convince me that they won't hurt me in the future. To the extent that I believe that those are evidences of change, then that makes it easier to make a decision to forgive. Another thing that makes it easy is to have empathy for the offender, or to see the offender through somebody else's eyes. So sometimes a mother talking about what her son did as a crime, and I could kind of see the son who did the crime against me through the eyes of the mother. What I like to think of as generous imagined empathy. In other words, I was able to forgive the young man who murdered my mom. Well, that young man has never been brought to trial. So I don't really know what he's like, but I could imagine what might have been going through his head in a generous way. I could imagine that he's feeling, anxiety about going to jail, that he's feeling angry about having a perfect crime. I don't know that that's true with this guy, but by that imagined generous empathy, that can help me make a decision to forgive the person. So it isn't just about looking at the offender differently, but also there are things that go on with us. And one of the things that I need to realize is that we are all broken. There is a guy that is like one of my heroes, is Brian Stevenson. I don't know if anybody saw the movie Just Mercy. I came across Brian Stevenson's book when it first came out because VCU accepted it as the kind of the read of the year, and everybody at VCU read that book, or was, it was given to it wasn't given to us, but we were encouraged to read it. And then Brian came and talked, and so, one of the stories that he tells is just such a wonderful story. He's on the phone with a guy that is his last appeal for clemency has just been turned down by the Supreme Court, and this guy's going to be executed within the hour. And Brian Stevenson said he is on the phone talking with this guy, and Brian is just weeping because the man is saying, Mr. Stevenson, this is a guy in Alabama. He's mentally challenged. And he says, Mr. Stevenson, he says, I just really appreciate what y'all have done for me. You've done so much. And I can't even imagine how much I can thank you for this. And here's Brian Stevenson just weeping on the other end of the phone. And he said, I was weeping because I realized that I am a broken person, that I live in a system that is broken, and that we are all broken. But I tried to tell myself what I often told these men and women that had, mostly men that were going to be executed, and that is that we are not as bad as the worst thing that we've ever done, nor are we as good as the best thing that we've ever done. That we are broken people in need of healing. And he said, in that gave me hope to go on with, with his work, trying to, the Equal Justice Initiative. So, here, this is his quote: each of us is more than the worst thing that we've ever done, or not as good as the best things that we've ever done. So the second thing about myself that I need to remember is that we can't fix ourselves, that we are broken and we need someone that can fix us. Is this movie, I forget when it was, it's not too old, but Tony Goldwyn plays Joshua. And the premise of this movie is that Joshua is basically Jesus who has come back into a little community, and he's a carpenter, and he, you know, by just being in the community and being with the people, he changes and transforms this entire community. He's about to leave, and the night before he leaves, this woman shows up, and she has been very hurt and bitter because her husband was killed in a car accident. And as she talks with Joshua that night, she gets really angry that she has been so harshly dealt with in her life. And she reaches down and she picks up a vase and she said, "This is the way that I was before. I was whole." And then she throws the vase down. It shatters, just shatters on the floor. And she says, "This is the way that I am now. I'm broken." The next morning, she's on her way out of town and she stops by the Catholic priest who in the movie, and the Catholic priest says, you know, Joshua left town this morning, but he stopped by and he left something for you because he knew you were going to be stopping by this morning. And he took a sculpture, a glass sculpture out, and he hands the sculpture to Maggie, the woman. And the priest says, "Not bad, huh? The guy takes 1,000,000 pieces of broken glass and makes something beautiful out of it." And he hands it to Maggie and she says, "Something whole." God can take us as broken people and can take our broken system and can make something beautiful out of it. So we see the offender and we see that we can't do everything on our own. And we also see the offender's vulnerability and their suffering and their brokenness. And these are the things that help us be more likely to make a decision to forgive. After that, then I come up with reasons, because remember that cognitive psychology I started out with, of how most of the reaction, most of the cognition, the mental work that we do is not logical and rational and reasonable. It's intuitive and feeling based and unconscious. And then we come along with the reasons that come from a lot slower logical thinking. And we come up with good reasons for why we behaved the way that we did and made this decision to forgive. Now, I'm going to skip over a lot of these reasons here. So you can kind of see these. So I said that it's important to use our rationality and our reason strategically. And one of some of the things that we can do is to have heroes of forgiveness. So I just want to tell you just a couple of stories that are my heroes of forgiveness, and maybe you'll be inspired by them too. It's a story of Chris Carrier. Now, I met Chris Carrier when I was on television. I was on the Lisa show, the Lisa Gibbons show, and I was a expert in forgiveness, and I was supposed to interview two newly wedded couples and predict the longevity of their marriage relationship through giving them questionnaires and through an interview. Well, this is a very fruitless task to do. But anyway, so I was the expert on the show. But Chris Carrier was one of the guests, and he was telling his story. And Chris's story was when he was 10 years old. Now, this is a public story, by the way. You can find this all over the internet. But when Chris was 10 years old, he got off from school one afternoon, and he was waiting on his dad to come and pick him up. And this guy comes by in a pickup truck and says, Chris, says, your dad is giving a surprise birthday party for your friend, such and such. And he asked me to pick you up and take you to the party. So Chris gets into the pickup truck with the guy. The guy doesn't take him to a party, but takes him out into the swamp and where there's a mobile home, and begins, after he gets Chris out of the truck, he begins to stab Chris and to try to kill him with an ice pick. And he's sitting, Chris said, he was sitting on my chest, and he was stabbing me in the body with the ice pick. And I was crying, and I was looking up at him, and I said, why are you doing this? And he said, I don't know why I'm doing this. And he said, I'll take you home. And he picks, Chris's hand up and takes him out to the truck. And as Chris steps up on the running board to get into the truck, the guy pulls a gun and puts it up against Chris's temple and shoots. And you can see the place where it came out Chris's other eye, and you can see where Chris's eye was damaged there. But he lived, and he woke up, he said, 3 days later out in the swamp, and made his way back to civilization and recovered from this. Well, about 20 years after that, Chris was working at a store. He was a youth pastor also, but he's working at a store. And this is in Florida too, by the way. And and so this deputy comes by and says, Chris, we've always thought we knew who did that crime against you and shot you, but we never had any evidence that we could really make this stick. And so he's dying, and he doesn't deserve to go out of this world without being confronted. And so he took Chris out to this mobile home, and sure enough, Chris recognizes this guy. And the guy's name was David McAuliffe, and I thought I had a picture of him, but Chris went over, and clearly this guy was dying, and Chris went over to him and said, so who's taking care of you? Because it was pretty obvious nobody was taking care of it. And the man says, well, I'm taking care of myself. So Chris not only forgave this man, but spent the last 2 weeks of this man's life caring for him as he made his transition out of life. So Chris Carrier was one of my heroes. Another one that I met in the year 2000 was a guy named Elias Chakour. Elias Chakour is a Palestinian Christian who wrote a book called Blood Brothers. And basically that title came from an incident that he told about. And the incident was that, so he formed a university that had 1/3 Jewish students, 1/3 Palestinians, and 1/3 Muslims. So Palestinian Christians and Muslims. So an equal across the different religions. Well, there was a murder, a mass murder of Muslims by a Jewish man about this time, and this guy goes into a mosque that's in worship and opens up with a automatic weapon and kills a bunch of Muslim worshipers. So the Muslims retaliate, and but Elias Shakur says, well, I wrote a letter to the government, you know, protesting against this violence. Well, about a month later, a Muslim with a suicide explosive attached goes into a crowded market in Tel Aviv and sets off this suicide bombing and injures hundreds of people in this crowded market. And Elias Shakur wrote another letter to the government protesting this. And he said, then a congregation of his students came to him and they confronted him. And they said, you know, Dr. Shakur, you've become an American. And he goes, what do you mean I've become an American? Says, well, you think that when these things happen, that all you have to do is write a letter to your congressman and that takes care of it. And he was embarrassed about this, but he said, well, what do you all think that I should do? And they said, well, we want to give blood for the people who have been injured in this, the Jewish people who've been injured in this suicide bombing. And so Elias Shakur says, okay, I'll try to set this up. So he calls the ministry and asks for the Jewish ministry and asks for a truck to be sent to take blood. He said, on the day that this is supposed to happen, 11 blood trucks show up. And he said, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible. You know, there are going to be 5 students out there giving blood and 11 trucks. Well, it turned out the students lined up and over 1,000 students gave blood that day. And they said, what we have done is we have taken our Palestinian blood, our Jewish blood, and our Palestinian Christian blood, our Jewish blood, and our Muslim blood from our university, and we have become blood brothers with these people. It's an amazing story of you know, of forgiveness, I think, among these students. Well, I did want to just show you just a little bit of science that's behind this 2 types of forgiveness, if this is okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to participate in an experiment with me right here. And so I'm going to describe a philosophical problem. This is called the footbridge problem. And in the footbridge problem, there is this footbridge across a set of tracks. And there is a guy up on the track, and I want you to imagine that maybe you're this person that's up on, not on the track, on the footbridge. And this person looks out and down the tracks and sees this out of control trolley or train that's just barreling down the tracks, and no one is at the controls. And as the person looks over the shoulder and he sees 5 people that he doesn't know that are standing on the tracks, and their backs are to the runaway train. And he realizes with 100% certainty, these 5 people are going to be killed by this train. He said, but if I only had a way to divert the train, well, as luck would have it, of course, there is a lever right in front of him. And he realizes that if he pulls this lever over from one side to the other, it will divert the train onto a side track. But if he does that, there is one person on that side track that will be killed. Now he realizes at this point that he's in the throes of a moral dilemma. He can do nothing and let nature take its course, and 5 people will be killed. Or he can take a positive action, throw that lever, and by his action, one person will surely be killed. So the question is now, if you were in that position, would you pull the lever, or would you let nature take its course and kill the 5 people? So I'm going to ask you to vote here, to declare yourself as to whether you would pull the switch. And so I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to say, would you pull the switch? 1, 2, 3, and then raise your hands if you would pull the switch. All right. Would you pull the switch, killing the 1, saving the 5? 1, 2, 3. All right. So I can tell by Zoom, 80% of the people would pull the switch. I know I can't really tell. I can only see 4 or 5 people's faces, actually. But the results of this study were that 80% of the people would pull the switch. All right. Scenario number 2, just like before.
Dr. Everett,
Yep.
here in the room, I think most people also raised their hand.
Yeah. Okay, good. I expected that. Now, so this is scenario number 2. Scenario number 2, just like before, a train barreling down the tracks, one person standing up above, looks over the shoulder, 5 people are on the track. This time, however, there is no one on the side track. So if we can just pull, divert the train onto the side track, no one will be killed. However, the person standing there looks and there's no lever to pull. And he looks over the edge and he sees that there is a lever down on the tracks right below where he's standing. Now, I know you're thinking, well, I would throw my body down on that lever, saving the 5. And, but unfortunately, he realizes he's at a bad angle and he would, not really actually hit the lever, just, and then 5 people die plus him. However, he realizes also that there is this stranger that he does not know that is sitting balanced on the edge of the little place where he's standing. So if he just takes 1 or 2 steps over and pushes this guy, he will fall down onto the lever and he will trip the switch, diverting the train, saving the 5, but he will not survive. Same exact moral dilemma as before. I don't pull the switch this time, but I have to push this guy to his death. Okay, now I'm going to do just like I did before. I'm going to ask, would you push the guy, killing the guy, but saving the 5? You have to declare yourself. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. How many people would push? Okay, now if you're like the people at Princeton who are doing this, only about 20% of the people said that they would push the guy. Now, same exact moral dilemma. Some people say, oh, no, it's not the same because, you have to push a guy. And that's very different from manipulating a cold piece of metal that allows, a distance, a death to occur at a distance. But, the answer to that is, what if instead of pushing the guy, you just had a Magnum 44, the most powerful handgun ever made, and you were standing over here and you shot the guy in his head? And no, we're just pulling an impartial piece of metal. No, we wouldn't do that. Even fewer than 20% of the people would do that. So why do I think that this supports the idea of emotional and decisional forgiveness? Well, because these people happened to be in a functional MRI unit when they were making these 2 choices. Only 20% of the people would push, but 80% would throw the lever. Now, they're in an fMRI unit and their brain activity is being monitored. And basically what is happening in scenario number 1, where they have to decide to do the lever, is, excuse me, is the reasoning centers in their brain are all firing, and it's weighing the decision, what's going to happen, and just their legal ramifications, and blah blah blah, and it's all intellectual. And in scenario number 2, as it's being described, it's all intellectual in the same exact way up until the moment where the experimenter says, there's no switch, but there's this guy balanced and you have to push the guy. And at that point, all that reasoning just goes away, and all of the emotion centers in the brain just light up, and the decision that gets made is an emotional decision, not a rational, logical decision that's being made. So I think this is kind of indirect evidence, doesn't deal with forgiveness at all, but it's indirect evidence that we've got these 2 systems in our body, this rational, logical decision-making system that calculates causes and effects and benefits and costs. And then we've got this other system that calculates it in an emotional way. Okay, so emotional forgiveness, these are the 5 steps to reach forgiveness. Now, I'm going to just go ahead just a second. So here, let me name the 5 steps, okay? And it takes very little time to say the 5 steps, but then I'm going to go back to that slide I just went away from and show you what is in the workbook to help you, to help whoever wants to work through these steps. So first thing that has to happen is we have to recall the hurt. So this is reach. Recall the hurt. We can't forgive something if we won't face that it was an offense or a hurt. But if we keep recalling the hurt in the same way that we have been recalling it, then we are probably not going to change anything. And so we have to change the way we recall it to empathizing with a person who hurt us. Or if we can't empathize, maybe sympathize or feel compassion for that person. To the extent that we start neutralizing that unforgiveness with empathy, we get to a place where we might be willing to give an altruistic gift of forgiveness. This is altruistic, this is unselfish, because that person doesn't deserve our forgiveness. This is something altruistic. If we give this altruistic gift that the person doesn't deserve of forgiveness, then we commit to the emotional forgiveness that we have experienced. And the reason that we commit to that experience is so that we will hold on to it whenever we doubt. So if I have forgiven someone and had emotional forgiveness, and this is my boss, and who's hurt me time and time again, and I walk into work on Monday, I'll tell you, you will not feel just love and joy toward this person. You will feel anger and negative feelings. And there is a reason for that. It's not that you have not forgiven the person. You have forgiven the person emotionally. It is because your body is operating exactly like God made your body to operate. And that is, our body is designed in a way that if we have been hurt in a situation, our body gives us signals to be careful about that situation. And the signals are emotions. They are anxiety, they are anger. Those are the warning signs that just say to our body, be careful, you got hurt here before, and you can get hurt again if you're not careful. So we will feel negative emotions, even though we have forgiven the person emotionally. And it has nothing to do with whether our forgiveness was invalid in some way. It's our body warning us. So these 5 steps are put into group. I mean, people can learn these in groups, and these groups can be run by anybody, basically. Lay people can run these groups almost exactly as effectively as people who have PhDs can run these groups. So it takes just very little training. I have a website. You see the website, Worthington-forgiveness.com. It has training tapes on there, or DVDs, or things that you can click on and see me run a group. It has training manuals for leaders. It has training manuals for participants, and these can be done in groups. Or if you don't have a group and you wanted to work through this individually, there are do-it-yourself workbooks, DIY workbooks, that have the same exercises that you can work through on your own. Now, what is in those, that free leader manual or free participant manual, these are all free. Everything on my website is free except my books, which they won't let me sell. I mean, they won't let me give away. I have to, they sell them. But everything else is free. So, so the Reach Forgiveness method, has people describe at the beginning a success that they have had forgiving someone. And this is to show, in a group, it shows that people have forgiven huge things in their life successfully. And if they can forgive these huge things, they can forgive whatever it is they're working on right now. We then define the 2 types of forgiveness, emotional and decisional. We don't define it by just telling them, but we put them through exercises where they come to these definitions on their own. We have them do a kind of a Lectio Divina type of experience where they think about, they meditate on, they concentrate on a scripture verse or a quote. And then we invite them to make a decision to forgive. They often are not willing to do that this early in the group, but we'll come back to that later. Then we take them through the 5 steps to forgive, the reach of the Reach Forgiveness model. That takes about maybe 4 hours of the 6 hours in a 6-hour group. We invite them after they've gone through those to make a decision now that their emotion has changed. And then the last hour or so, 30 minutes to an hour, is spent on kind of widening the number of things that they can forgive and building a disposition of forgiveness. So these are the things that are in those workbooks, those DIY workbooks, and also the groups. So let me tell you, we've done 30 studies on this that are randomized controlled trials worldwide. I say we, but I mean people have. I have not participated in all of those. And we found some things through looking at all of the forgiveness research that are important. The main important thing is the more time that people try to spend, or that they spend trying to forgive, the more forgiveness they'll experience. It is a straight line relationship. More time equals more forgiveness. The second thing that you find is that forgiveness, as people forgive more, their sense of overall hope goes up. And the third thing that we found is that as hope goes up, depression goes down and anxiety goes down. If a person goes through a 6-hour forgiveness group, they will reduce their depression and anxiety 1/3 of the 1/3 of the amount that they would reduce if they went through a half a year of weekly psychotherapy for depression or anxiety with the best approach to dealing with depression and anxiety that science has documented. So we know that this forgiveness drags along hope and depression and anxiety. One final thing before I leave forgiveness, I want to be sure that we realize that reconciliation is different than forgiveness. We don't have to reconcile with anybody. In the scripture, Paul says, as much as it is up to you, live at peace with all people. But it's not always up to us. If a person wants to hurt us continually, we are not going to be able to live at peace with them. And sometimes the best way to deal with that is to just not deal with that person. So before I leave forgiveness, let me just mention what I've talked about. We've talked about the injustice gap and how it changes with events that happen. We've shown that there are many alternatives to forgiving, not just forgiveness, but forbearing and turning it over to God and seeking justice and accepting and moving on. We've identified two types of forgiveness, decisional and emotional forgiveness. We have shown that forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciliation, that we don't have to reconcile, but we should forgive. And forgiveness takes place inside my body, whereas reconciliation is a transaction between people. And we've looked at the reach forgiveness model, a method of forgiving. So as a kind of final thought before I leave forgiveness, I ask myself this when I come up against somebody who aggravates me, somebody who does something that hurts my feelings. If Chris Carrier can forgive what he went through, what is it that's so hard about this person aggravating me that I can't make a decision and move forward toward more emotional forgiveness? All right. I have about a little less than 20 minutes left, and I would like to cover political humility and just get down to some practical issues, if that's okay. So if you'll bear with me, I'm not going to do a bunch of the things that I was going to do. One of the things that I was going to do is to show you how much science has contributed to understanding political humility and how to deal with it. And we've got contributions from sociologists, we've got all kinds of contributions, but basically a survey after the 2016 presidential election showed that 1/6 of all people in the United States lost a close relationship with a friend or family member as a result of political discussions after the 2016 presidential election. And so, I'm going to try to just kind of give you a bird's eye view of the science on this. Sociology, Robert Putnam shows that there are two types of social capital that we can invest in, three types. Bonding social capital, which is, the relationships within our group, our in-group. Bridging social capital, which is relationships across the two groups. And we also have social capital where we link to government and other administrative figures. But I want to concentrate on bonding social capital. Bonding social capital is we get a lot by recognizing that we have a lot in common with people in our groups, people who go to church with me, people in my family, people in my workplace, people who are in all kinds of groups. I play pickleball. I don't know if anybody plays pickleball. I play pickleball. The pickleball community has a lot of, the relationships. So, however, that bonding social capital has costs also. And the costs, the way we label ourselves, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, binds us to the people that are like us, but separates us from the people who are different from us, the out-group members. So positive psychology shows that when we have this social capital that is bonding social capital, we can let it become what is called tribal superiority. My group is better than your group. I mean, do we see this with the political situation today or what? You know, my group is better than your group, whoever it is. This tribal superiority. Tribal superiority leads to negative emotions. One is anger with the other group. The other is contempt for the other group. Contempt, you know, contempt. It's like they are just not worthwhile as people. Well, that contempt turns out to be the pivotal point in the disintegration of relationships. When we feel contempt for the other side, it changes everything. So John Gottman, who studied this with couples, have shown that when couple relationships deteriorate, they do so in a very predictable way. They start criticizing each other. They defend against the criticism. But when they start to say, it's not the issue, but it's you that are really the problem, that contempt is what sends relationships into either what he calls war, which is perpetual conflict, or stonewalling, which is to say, I am a rock, I feel no pain, you can't get to me, you know. And that's the two ways that we deal with these political differences or religious differences or other in-group, out-group differences. We also, you know, presume that we're right. And even people who are in our in-group, if they're not as extreme as we are, or they're more extreme than we are, we want to get rid of them. I call that eating our own. This can lead to dehumanizing the other side, which is a recipe for prejudice, then discriminating in the way we treat people, hate crimes, mass killing, and even genocide. So then it's bridging social capital. It's making relationships across the aisle that really is going to repair some of this damage. But deep polarization and contempt make this very unlikely unless we can deal with that polarization and contempt. So political humility is an internal attitude of being able to deal with differences in a way that that allows us to continue to be respectful and tolerate differences and be committed and yet to our own views and yet civil in the way we treat others. I'm going to tell you a little anecdote. This is by Arthur Brooks. He's a very conservative guy. He's teaching at Harvard right now, which I'm sure is a peak emotional experience for a really conservative guy. But he tells this anecdote about how when he wrote his first book, he was so proud of this book. And he just was basking in, oh, I've published a book. This is going to be wonderful. Everybody's going to love it. Well, the very next day after it gets published, he gets an email. And when he opens it up, it just seems to go on and on. It's so critical and everything is being criticized down to including figure captions that are being criticized. And, you know, and it goes 10,000 words, this email does. And so he is really upset with this, and he's just wandering around his room fuming at this guy who's done all this criticism. And he said, suddenly I realized he read my book. He read even the figure captions on my book, and he sat down to email, and he types out an email saying, thank you for reading my book. I appreciate that you took it so seriously. I'm sure we're not going to agree on the solutions here, But nevertheless, I want to thank you for reading it and taking it so seriously. He said within a minute, his email pings again and he opens it up. It's from this guy. And this guy says to him, listen, if you're ever through Dallas, you know, why don't you call me up and here's my phone number and we'll sit down and talk over a dinner. He basically took a person who was an enemy and by, you know, acting in a respectful, civil way, he turned this guy into a potential friend. Well, I want to just skip to a couple of things that are some practical guidelines for having those political discussions with people you don't agree with while avoiding a culture of contempt and judgmentalism and polarization that happens in like a Thanksgiving meal. These are general practical guidelines. 1, don't presume you are right and feel, and especially express, contempt for somebody who takes another side, treating them as if they were somehow ignorant or stupid or evil. 2nd, emphasize the things you agree on in this Thanksgiving meal. And that is going to be basically you value fairness and you value compassion. Control your anger. The best way to do that is breathe out. If I breathe out, that means I will breathe in. When you breathe out, it's slow, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is what calms you. So breathing out activates that parasympathetic calming nervous system. Use coping strategies that work for you. Number 5, if a person treats you as ignorant, stupid, or evil, don't lower yourself to that level in your responses. Number 6, build political humility. That is, discuss political issues, but keep that attitude of humility, accepting your own strengths and weaknesses, being teachable, modest, and being sure to be oriented to lift others up and not put them down. Number 7, pursue win-win thinking. Get at the interests that the person has behind the position they take. Most people disagree about positions that are opposed and can't be reconciled, but you have common interests. Why did you take that position? Those often will reveal a way to make a win-win situation. Number 8, forgive the wrongs that have been done to you by this person. Number 9, seek reconciliation as much as it is up to you. As much as it's up to you, live at peace with all people. Don't wait for the other person to get to the middle and give first. Start from your position and work toward the middle. Number 10, love your enemy. And if you can't do that, at least practice committed civility. Those are general guidelines. And now what I'm going to do is just look at specific things. So 5 specific things you can do ahead of time. 1, go ahead and forgive old Uncle Mort. You know he's going to pop off. You know he's going to say something that aggravates everybody in the room. So you might as well get the forgiveness out of the way before the dinner. Go ahead and forgive him. You know, empathize, be altruistic, be grateful. 2nd thing you can do ahead of time, plan positive topics to talk about instead of knowing all these negative rabbit trails that you can get pulled off into. 3rd thing you can do ahead of time, plan ways to cope if you get provoked and your anger pops up. Number 4, realize that it's not fair that you are trying to take the weight of kind of keeping things smooth. It isn't fair. but often in family and with people that we really care about, let's let care for them outweigh the fair. Number 5, understand that reactions are complex and that person is responding out of a lot of different things, a lot of beliefs and values and philosophy in their life, and a lot of specific things that have happened to them in their life. Sometimes understanding how complicated it is can help. 6 things you can do if you start to get wound up. 1, realize that beliefs are not causing them to attack you. It is threat to their ego and their values and their existential belief system. It's a threat of loss of love. That's the thing that is getting people provoked. And number 2, we can look at the other side of threat. If we are starting to get wound up, it's usually not the logic that we're responding to. It's, I'm feeling threatened. I'm feeling like I'm going to lose this friend. I'm feeling like I'm going to lose my prestige. I'm going to lose a position as a respected person. So realize there's things below the logic here. Number 3, take personal responsibility for our part. Number 4, how to reduce the threat. Love your enemies. Value the other person, don't devalue. Affirm in humility that well-meaning people can have different beliefs and values. Tell yourself, I can't win this argument. How many arguments have you ever, by logic and reason, convinced the other person? There's a cartoon in the paper today by Dilbert, the Dilbert cartoon. If you all, anybody takes the paper and gets the Dilbert, it is about that exactly. Number 5, consider peacemaking. Ask yourself, am I being a peacemaker? Or am I creating disharmony? Say yourself, I don't have to be the sole defender of the truth. 2 specific things to do if the worst happens and arguments break out. First, kind of cope with it, reduce the injustice gap. And second, forgive. Emotional forgiveness and decisional forgiveness. So I'm just not advocating to avoid all conflict. We need conflict, but there's a time and a place for conflict, and usually the Thanksgiving dinner is not the time and place for that conflict. Also, I'm not saying you have to get along with everybody. You know, there are people that are just so toxic that we do not want to continue to interact with them. All right, so I think I'm going to stop about here. I wish I could talk with you. Let me just mention about hope. There are 2 approaches to hope. One is about having goals and knowing the ways to get to the goals and having the willpower to get to the goals. I think that's kind of prevalent mostly among younger folks. There's another kind of hope that we call persevering hope, and this is more about seeing that you can't always get to the goals that you want. The people with chronic pain, people with divorces, people with physical disabilities, they can't get to the goals they want, but they have to persevere anyway. So here is our persevering hope scale that we are just making up and just about to send out for publication. And I'm going to stop here because it's 11:58. And I don't know if you end directly on time or if you have time where people can ask questions, but I'll stop here. Thank you all for hanging in there. It's a lot of fire hose that you're drinking from today. So thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you so much. I think let's give a round of applause. And to answer your question, we always go over time. So if is it okay if some people would ask just a
Sure.
few
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anyone here in the room that has a question or something that you want to ask? Can we remove the sharing? Thank you. Can we have that?
Can you put the Zoom people on the screen?
So is there anyone that wants to ask a question or don't come and ask Lucky and I because
Afterwards, yeah.
we won't have the answers.
We usually
So,
don't.
Sammy, come.
So if anybody has questions in the room, please come up here. If anybody on Zoom has questions, maybe.
Some people in Zoom, they have
Okay, so
Okay,
we'll try
one
to go
second. So,
slowly and
Sam.
take it one at a time, as far as Professor Everett wants to go, yeah?
Okay, get closer and you can
Okay.
tell your name.
Hi, my name is Samantha, and I learned so much. I took like 8 pages of notes on everything you said. I wish I could have your slideshow because I'm in a situation where I want to forgive. I've made the decision, but I'm struggling with the emotional part. So I want to know if there's somewhere else, or I don't want to say I feel like you didn't go into too much detail of the how. How can we, I know how to make the decision. I do it every day, but I want to do the emotional part because I really want to forgive, to build the relation, to have the betters, that list of betters, my better spirituality, better relationship, because it's something I'm faced every day. And the replaying the tape. My cousin just told me this week, like, you got to stop replaying the tape. Okay, how? How? Because there's a lot of triggers. And
Put a different thing.
how? Okay, how? Yeah.
Okay, ask him. So, no, wait for him
Oh.
to answer. So that's for you.
Yeah, Samantha, I
Yeah.
certainly those workbooks, those do-it-yourself workbooks
Oh, yeah.
will lead you through 6 hours of which they're do-it-yourself. You can shorten, you can do what you want to do, you know, but they will give you kind of step-by-step how to do this. So, so they're free, absolutely free. Open up in Word and you can work through it. And, you know, the triggers, yeah, I mean, triggers are going to happen. And so the best way is like some of that practical advice I gave for the avoiding the discussion is think about what usually triggers you. And then think about how am I going to deal with this ahead of time to keep the emotion under more control than I do if it just whamps me when I'm unaware. Because if you kind of are going into a situation that you are likely to be triggered, then preparing for that can sometimes, you know, make it less an emotional impact on you. And then you can kind of process it when you get, you know, home away from the chance that this blows up in a situation, and then, you know, work through the little, you know, the steps. Now, I said there's a 6-hour workbook. There's a 19-hour group exercise document on there, and there's a 2-hour workbook. And the way that we you know, coach people to do this is if they work through the 6-hour workbook and they kind of get all the details, after that, they don't have to go through 6 hours every time. There's a 2-hour workbook that kind of hits the high points that they can then just kind of think through the structure of it in much less time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Giovanna,
Huh?
Bob has a question.
Okay.
So, tell him to mute himself.
Bob, can you unmute your singer, Bob?
Bob Singer?
I'll sing it.
You have to mute.
Yeah, I'm singing to unmute. You can unmute himself.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah. I don't know, even know if this is sort of appropriate, but usually when forgiveness works in 2 directions. So if there's like a mutual problem and both sides are angry or unforgiving, and one side wants to forgive, does there come a point, is it only like what you're talking about, like within yourself, so you can live within yourself? Or is it about letting the other person know that you forgive them, but what if they don't care, or they don't want to deal with your forgiveness? Or is there a point where you say it's futile? Or are you just talking about what's going on inside you so you could have inner peace?
Well, forgiveness happens inside your skin. So it is an experience that happens inside of you, but it happens in a interpersonal context. So, so there are interpersonal acts that are going to change the size of that injustice gap. So if you if the other person, well, first of all, we usually say to a person, don't tell the other person, I forgive you. Because if I say to you, I forgive you, it also says in parentheses, you did something wrong. It is an accusation. And people don't respond well to accusations if they don't think they did something wrong, or they think you did something even wronger than they did. So it's provocative to say to the person, I forgive you, unless the person is soliciting that and saying, do you forgive me? And then you can say, I forgive you. But saying I forgive you is it's not forgiveness. It's a social act that's part of reconciliation. So again, if the other person doesn't want to reconcile, you're not going to reconcile. It will help both people forgive to the extent that both people can take responsibility for what they did, can apologize for what they did, can make amends for what they did. But if one person doesn't want to do that, then that reconciliation is not going to happen.
Thank you. That answered my question.
Thank you so much. Mel, do you have a question? Mel Tannen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mel.
Oh, great. This was a wonderful seminar. Really enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. I kind of come from the school that I believe that certain acts and behaviors are simply not forgivable. And right now we're entering into Holocaust Remembrance Week. And as a Jew myself, who's lost so many countless direct family members through the Holocaust, I would find it impossible to ever forgive Hitler, nor would I want to ever forgive Hitler. And as Dr. Worthington just said, he certainly would not want me to forgive him if he were still alive. And what I really enjoyed the last comment, that it really requires some mutuality, that both parties need to be in it together. And I have found in life many times, one party may want to forgive, but the other party may not want to engage in that act of forgiveness. And I also wanted to mention to what the gentleman just made a comment about, what if the other person doesn't want to accept forgiveness? This is something that's come up in Judaism, and we've asked our rabbi this question many times. And just to give you a different perspective, in Judaism, it's written that it's incumbent upon us to ask forgiveness of those who have wronged us, for example, and we must go to them at least 3 times before we can call it quits. Once is not enough, twice is not enough. If after 3 times we seek out their acceptance of our forgiving them, and they are not interested, then we call it quits. But I just thought I'd throw that in there. But I'm interested in Dr. Worthington's perspective, and I think I got it from the last comment, that there are certain acts, certain heinous things that take place and that affect us and affect society as a whole that are simply unforgivable, notwithstanding the tremendous damage that it can do to us by not forgiving, but they're simply, at least in my mind, not forgivable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
Yeah, I know the various Jewish perspectives on this. I heard Jonathan Sachs of Great Britain, who just died, I think, about a week ago. But I heard him talking about Maimonides' summary of the steps that are necessary for forgiveness. I understand that the Jewish position on this. My belief is that the human experience of this is the same. The language that we use around it, the words we put around it, are different, and so I have not found much difference between myself and various Jewish thinkers that I've interacted with over the years. I would say, from my perspective, nothing is in principle unforgivable, but some acts create such a large injustice gap that, practically speaking, we can't get over them. And so, if people want to use the language of saying, well, that's unforgivable, okay, that's fine. I think it's in principle forgivable, practically speaking, unforgivable. But there's also those other alternatives that we can bring into that situation, like the more justice that's done, the more that the less I have to forgive. Now, one of the things that Rabbi Sachs said was that in Judaism, if I am offended, I have to be the one to forgive. But if murder has taken place or character assassination has taken place, then those are unforgivable because the person murdered can never forgive. And therefore, within that Jewish framework, murder is unforgivable. So so that's kind of the way that I understand that Jewish perspective, and understand how it is arrived at that there are unforgivable acts. I would say, that the way that I would approach this myself is, yeah, the person who was murdered can't forgive the one who murdered them because they're dead right now. But if I am living, I have been, wronged by that act. And so it's about whether I can forgive that act. And I have not been murdered. So I am forgiving a different act. I am forgiving the offense of having people that I love and care for, and I have in my identity group that have been murdered, and seeing that, and what impact that has had on me. So anyway, it's a complex, once you start the interreligious dialogues, we're saying the same things interpersonally, I mean, saying the same things conceptually, but we're using different words in different ways, and therefore it's hard to agree on the language that fits both points of view. It's better to translate and be, just shifting back and forth among different perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think maybe we just have one more. And Lisi, you have a question, so unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for how much I learned this morning. As I was thinking of my question, I kind of answered myself. So I just wanted to share it. My
Yeah,
question
that was my easiest question right there. So, and actually, that I do best on those kind.
Well, my question initially was, for me, it's not so much about forgiving. I'm not saying that I'm that quick to forgive, but it's become easier. What I find difficult is the very strong need to be forgiven for my wrongdoings, and asking for forgiveness, and then knowing that my daughters, okay, so I'll go to my daughters, explain, I'm sorry, I know I've wronged you, blah 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 blah, and immediately it's okay, it's fine. And then I go in, no, it's not fine, it's not okay, da 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 da. So my question was, what can I do? It was a selfish question. What can I do to truly make them understand and believe and trust that I am genuinely sorry? But I answered my own question, and it's about everything you were speaking about. I'm sorry, this morning, about action, and repeated behaviors, and how can I expect them to trust that my need to be forgiven is genuine if I revert back to my old ways, and then it all came full circle, because like with my husband, like I can forgive him, but not that easily, because in the back of my mind, I'm protecting myself. And don't get me wrong, my husband is awesome. He whatever. It's hard because I'm going, well, you got to protect yourself. You got to have boundaries. And it's kind of complicated. But at the end of the day, and I answered my own question, it's about our behavior. And everything takes time, and things aren't going to happen overnight. And like Lucky said, this doesn't happen by osmosis. This is work, this is hard work. And I learned so much from everything you had to say. And it just made such perfect sense. And I'm really glad that I was just able to stay throughout your whole talk. I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you're feeling better. So thank you. We have somebody here that would like to ask a question. This is Amarili.
Hi, Dr. Everett.
Hi.
Okay, so basically my question was, what role does trust play in forgiveness? Like, is there a correlation between trust and forgiveness? Or like, would you say, I don't know, would you say that like someone that trusts more can forgive more? Like, what would you say about that?
Yeah. So remember, I went over it fast, but the way that I defined reconciliation is restoration of trust in a relationship where trust has been damaged. And in order to restore that trust, both people have to be trustworthy. So, so trust is really an interpersonal sharing. Really, I can say I trust you, but if you're not going to be trustworthy, we're not going to have trust in the relationship, or not for long anyway. So I would say that, a person who is more inclined to trust someone else is probably going to be more motivated right away to forgive. But if the other person is not going to be trustworthy, there's going to be disappointment there. But what I would do is I would just still separate out that forgiveness is something I can do whether I trust the person or not. You know, I can make a decision that I'm going to treat this person as a valued person, you know, whether I trust them or not, because trust is in a different ball game. It's in the interpersonal exchange and the reconciliation and the how we treat each other version. So I would say I can free myself up by forgiving. I can change the relationship by forgiving, because, you know, if I forgive, they will sense it and they will probably not be quite as harsh as they were before. But I might want to protect myself from getting hurt, you know, in the interpersonal realm, if I know that this person is likely to hurt me again and again and again. I don't know if that really fully explained things.
Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you. Thank you so
much.
much. And it's 12:20, and I think we're gonna wrap it up for the day. And Lucky's making his way here. I know there were other people that had questions, but sorry, I mean, it's just time-wise, this is what we could do. But Lucky, so.
Okay, Professor Worthington, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Really appreciate it, and God bless you.
We're gonna give you another round.
Thank you for taking out your precious time and sharing all your wisdom with us. It's been really a great morning. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. God bless you, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family.
Yes, thank you.
And remember what you not to talk about.
Well, I'm afraid, unfortunately, we are resolving that because we decided we couldn't really travel. It wasn't safe.
Oh.
So, but on Zoom, we'll be careful about what we want to talk about.
Thank you so much. God bless you and your family. And hopefully there'll be another time that we meet again. And we appreciate every single word and every single hour that you've dedicated to this amazing subject.
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy for us now to get all this information that has taken hours and hours.
No, years, decades.
And
lifetime.
A lifetime, 40 years.
For him to develop it.
So thank you. We truly appreciate it. We appreciate your work, and there are hungry people out here that appreciates it and wants to try, at least to attempt to put it into action. So thank you so much, because your research has made it easier for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
God bless you. Bye. To everyone that's still on Zoom, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Susan, we can see your turkey. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone that came here in person. And so, Susan, do you want to say something? Unmute yourself.
You can put it all on there, whole screen. Just every gallery, right?
You're muted, Susan.
Yeah. Just very grateful for the past 2 years journey I've been on with you guys, and having Doug to come and join in on that, and just walking together with this great community and family. And I'm just very, very grateful for all the learning and education, the speakers. I could be sad that I had to take 72 years very shortly in another few days to get to this point, but I'm not going to be. I'm going to be very grateful and very thankful and have the joy from that.
Ooh, yes. You have been a blessing to this community, Susan. We love you, and we love Doug too. And seeing you, not having you been able to come here, it's really sad, and we truly, truly miss you guys.
Miss you too.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye, Doug. Same to you guys.
Bye.
Bye. So thank you everyone for joining us. I think we're gonna wrap it up. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Remember, for those that are here Thursday, we're not gonna have support group. Some of us are gonna be having a little turkey and avoiding all those conversations. At least now we know the tools and how to handle them. Saturday, also we're giving the time off to have quiet time, to spend with your family, to rest. I'm sure, I know Lucky and I need rest. So we're really gonna enjoy it. So thank you, Carmen. It was so good to see you, Laurita, and everyone, Yvette, everyone that's there. So Patty, and we miss you guys, and my sister Mari, thank you for joining us, and Luis. God bless you all. Don Rafa, we missed you here today. But anyway, so God bless you all. See you. Bye.
I want a heart that forgives, a heart full of love, one with compassion just like yours above, one that overcomes evil with goodness and love, like it never happened, never holding a grudge. Want a heart that forgives, that lives and lets live, one that keeps loving over and over again, one that men can offend because your word is within, one that loves without price like you, Lord Jesus Christ. Want a heart that loves everybody, even my enemies. Want to love like you, be like you, just like you did. Want a heart that forgives. Want a heart that forgives when the ones that are closest, that I've known the longest, hurt me the most. I still want to love them just like you love me, even though I'm hurting. I want a heart that forgives when the pain is so deep, it's so hard to speak about it to anyone, just like your son. I give up my right to hold it against them with hatred inside. I want a heart that loves everybody, even my enemies. I want to love like you, be like you, just like you did. I want to walk like you, talk like, just like you did. Want to be like you, live like you, just like you did. 'Cause a heart that forgives is the heart that will live, totally free from the pain of the past. And the heart that lets go is the heart that will know so much freedom. Lord, I want to let it go. Hey, hallelujah. God, I need to let it go. Lord, it's been holding me back, and I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it no more. I don't know exactly what to do to get rid of it, but here I am, Lord Jesus. Here I am, oh, here I am, Lord Jesus. Oh, Lord, I need you, I need you. I know this is me. that you're talking to. This is me, this is me, this is me, Lord, this is me. Lord, I let it go. Every person that's ever hurt me, God, I let it go. Every single hurt, God, I let it go. Every single pain, God, I let it go. I let it go. I let it go. Lord, you can have. Lord, you can have. Lord, you can have it. Lord, you can have it. You can have it now. You can have it now. 'Cause I don't want it no